Hello and welcome back, guys. We're now starting a new story, The Greenlit Café, by Wolfie_pup1231. You can find author's profile link in the description. Let's begin. Open sign, open heart. The bell above the door jingled softly as the first rays of morning sunlight slipped through the windows, painting the wooden floors in warm, golden hues. It was quiet, peaceful, like the world hadn't quite woken up yet. Izuku Midoriya wiped the last bit of foam off the countertop, then straightened with a tired but content sigh. His apron was already dusted with flour and coffee stains, curls a little messy, freckles catching the soft light. He adjusted the "open" sign on the door before turning back into the heart of the cafe. The Greenlit Café. It had taken him over a year to bring it to life. A quiet dream born not from ambition but necessity. A place for everyone. Heroes, villains, outcasts, nobodies. People who had nowhere else to go, just like him. As long as they respected the rules, they were welcome. No fighting. No discrimination. No destroying property. Simple rules. The kind he wished the world had followed a long time ago. He stepped behind the counter and flipped on the espresso machine, listening to its low hum. It was still early. School had just started for most people, meaning he had a good hour before the rush. If there even was a rush today. Izuku, he muttered to himself, checking the stock of milk. You forgot to pick up more oat milk again. He scribbled it down on the corner of a napkin and stuck it under a magnet on the fridge. His handwriting was still a little shaky, old habits from flinching too much as a kid, but it was getting better. The scar above his collarbone itched slightly. He reached up absent-mindedly, tracing it with 2 fingers before catching himself. No more hiding. Not here. This cafe was his. A safe space. And scars were just a reminder that he was still standing. The bell above the door chimed again. He looked up, expecting a delivery guy or maybe someone who had gotten lost looking for the train station. Instead, a familiar explosion-headed teen stomped in, looking thoroughly irritated. "Kaken," Izuku greeted, wiping his hands on a towel. "You're here early." "Shut it, nerd," Katsuki grumbled, sliding into a stool at the counter like he owned the place. He dropped his school bag next to him with a thud. Class was cancelled. Some villain CRP. Figured I'd stop by before your loser cafe got packed. Izuku smiled, genuinely this time. You want your usual. TCH, duh. He started working on a cinnamon-spiked cold brew, the kind Katsuki pretended he didn't like but always finished down to the last drop. The silence between them was easy now, comfortable. It hadn't always been. There were still things they hadn't said, and maybe never would. But somehow, in the quiet hum of the Greenlit Café, that felt okay. You sleep last night? Katsuki asked suddenly, not meeting his eyes. Izuku paused, then shrugged. A few hours. You know how it is. Yeah, well, the blonde muttered. You look like CRP. Izuku laughed softly. Love you too, Kaken. He passed over the drink just as another customer walked in, an older woman with a limp and a hero's badge tucked into her coat pocket. She gave a tired smile and took a corner seat, nodding her thanks. Izuku's heart swelled just a little. This was why he opened the cafe. To serve people who had nowhere else to go. To give them what he had needed when he was a scared, quirkless kid hiding bruises with long sleeves and excuses. And slowly it was working. Katsuki took a slow sip of his drink, trying to look unimpressed, but Izuku caught the way his shoulders relaxed just slightly. That cinnamon-spiked cold brew was his comfort drink, and they both knew it. I don't know how you do this, CRP, he muttered, glancing around at the calm, cozy interior of the cafe. The shelves were lined with mismatched mugs and books. A cat-shaped cookie jar sat near the register. There were potted plants in the windows that Izuku talked to when he was bored. Like, running this place. Every single day. You're still just a dumbass 15-year-old. Izuku smiled faintly as he wiped a spot off the counter. Yeah, but I'm a dumbass 15-year-old who makes a mean hazelnut latte. That's not something to brag about. Then why do you keep coming back? Katsuki didn't answer. He just took another sip and glared at nothing in particular. The cafe door opened again. This time it was a man in his 20s, face shadowed under a hoodie. His eyes darted around calculating, sharp. Izuku didn't recognize him, but something about the way he moved was familiar. Villain, maybe. Or just someone who had learned to survive by watching every exit. Izuku offered a soft, polite smile. Welcome in. Sit wherever you like. The man looked surprised for a second, like he hadn't expected to be welcomed anywhere, but nodded and took a seat in the far corner. He kept his hands on the table the whole time. Didn't take off his hoodie. Kaken leaned in just a little, voice low. You gonna kick him out? No, Izuku said gently. He hasn't broken any rules. Kaken made a face but didn't argue. That was one thing he'd learned quickly about the cafe. Izuku had rules and not even Kaken got to bend them. Villain, hero, nobody in between, it didn't matter. Everyone got the same chance. Izuku made the man a tea without being asked. He walked it over carefully, placing it in front of him with a soft, here. On the house. The man stared down at it, then up at him. You don't know what I've done, kid. Izuku's voice didn't waver. Maybe not. But you're not doing it here. There was a long, tense pause, then a tiny, barely there nod. Izuku walked back to the counter, heart pounding just a little. Not in fear, he was used to people like that. No, it was something else. That old ache. The one that whispered, this is what you needed. A place where someone saw you and didn't flinch. You're seriously something else, Deku, Kaken muttered, shaking his head. Like, it's not normal how much you trust people. I don't trust everyone, Izuku said quietly. I just remember what it felt like to be treated like a villain before I ever did anything wrong. Kaken went still. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The hum of the espresso machine, the clink of a spoon, the soft crackle of music from the radio in the back, it all filled the space between them. Then Kaken said, gruffly, you're not a villain. Never were. Izuku's eyes widened a bit. His chest ached in that complicated way it always did when Kaken said something real. Thanks, Kaken. Yeah, whatever. The bell rang again, letting in a burst of spring air, and with it, two schoolgirls in flashy uniforms, giggling about something on their phones. They took seats near the front, their laughter light and bubbly. One of them ordered a strawberry smoothie. The other asked if the cafe had gluten-free options. Izuku was already moving to help, putting on his best gentle smile. But behind him, he heard Kaken mutter, told you it was gonna get packed. Izuku shot him a teasing glance. You planning to help out or just hog the counter? Kaken scoffed. Hell no. I'm not some waiter. You could wipe tables. Do I look like your DMN employee? Izuku grinned. A little. And despite the grumbling, Kaken did end up grabbing a rag and swiping lazily at a few empty tables, complaining the whole time, of course, but Izuku didn't miss the way he glanced toward the register when he thought no one was looking. Protective. Like he was keeping an eye on things. By noon, the cafe was full. A pro-hero with his hood pulled low was reading a paperback novel in the corner. A group of construction workers took their lunch break near the windows. The hoodie-wearing man stayed quiet and still, occasionally sipping his tea. And Izuku felt tired, yeah. His back ached a little. But his heart was full. Because this was his dream. Not All Might's dream. Not a hero dream. His. A place where people could breathe. A place where people could be. Regulars and rhythm. The Greenlit Café had a rhythm to it. It wasn't loud or busy like some downtown coffee chains. It didn't blast hero-themed playlists or advertise specialty drinks named after pro heroes. No billboards. No mascots. Just a chalkboard out front, a handwritten menu, and warm light that spilled through the windows like sunlight through leaves. Izuku liked it that way. The cafe started to fill up around 8 a.m. every weekday. Office workers on their way to the train. Parents after school drop-offs. Tired heroes coming off night shifts who just needed something hot and sweet to carry them home. The regulars knew him by name now, and some even brought him little things: extra napkins, books for the shelf, a bag of lemons from their backyard tree. He was always polite. Always kind. Always watching, just a little. The first rush died down around 9:30, and Izuku finally got to sit for a moment. He tucked himself behind the counter, sipping a lukewarm matcha latte and scribbling down ideas for new pastries in a little green notebook. Kaken says cinnamon is good. Maybe a cinnamon matcha roll. Or something with yuzu glaze. Try testing tomorrow. He yawned into the notebook and blinked at the smudged ink. You look like you're running on fumes, kid. Izuku jumped slightly and looked up to see Genji, a gruff old man who used to be a rescue hero before retirement. He stopped by every other morning, ordered black coffee and a plain muffin, and always left a tip that was exactly 130 yen. Never more. Never less. I'm good, Genji-san, Izuku replied with a small smile. Just thinking through some new recipes. Genji grunted and picked up his muffin. Don't overdo it. Burnout ain't pretty. I'll try. The old man gave a low chuckle. You always say that. Izuku watched him settle into his usual seat by the window. He pulled out a crossword puzzle and circled his mug with both hands like it was something sacred. Moments like that made it all worth it. By mid-morning, Izuku was back behind the counter, restocking syrup bottles and rinsing out the milk pitchers. The radio played softly in the background, an old pop song he recognized from when his mom used to hum it while washing dishes. He smiled to himself and hummed along, moving automatically, hands in rhythm. The bell rang again. This time it was a younger customer, maybe university age. Bright red hair, long scar across one eye, wearing a faded denim jacket and fingerless gloves. He walked up to the counter with a hesitant smile. Hey, he said, voice casual but unsure. So this place. It really, lets anyone in. Izuku nodded. As long as you follow the rules. No fighting, no hate, no property damage, the guy quoted, pointing at the sign taped to the counter. Kinda wild. Most places freak if you even look like you might have a record. Well, Izuku said softly, everyone deserves a second chance. Or a first one. That got a pause. Then, slowly, the redhead's shoulders eased a bit. I'll just take a coffee. Black. Coming right up. He made it quick and smooth, then slid it across with a soft, here you go. The guy blinked down at it, like he wasn't sure it was real. Then he took a sip and his whole expression changed. Not dramatically. Just softer. Like something in him was thawing a little. Thanks, man. Izuku smiled again. You're welcome. The rest of the day came in waves. A pair of exhausted support course students came in around noon, arms full of gadgets and notebooks. Izuku made them energy drinks and let them charge their laptops at the corner table. A DLVRY guy brought a huge box of beans and nearly dropped it on his foot. Izuku helped him carry it inside and gave him a free bagel as thanks. Kaken stopped by again around 3, grumbling about a training exercise that left him soaked and singed, and snagged a chocolate scone before disappearing into the back to dry off. Don't burn the place down while I'm gone. Izuku called after him. Shut up, nerd. It was the most affectionate yelling Izuku had ever heard. Around 4:30, things slowed again. Izuku stood by the front window, wiping down the glass as the sky started to dim. The city outside moved on without him. People hurrying, kids laughing, distant sirens wailing, bikes zipping past. He didn't miss being part of that rush. This cafe was his little pocket of stillness. He turned back toward the interior, toward the shelves of books and quiet music and half-finished drinks. The Greenlit cafe wasn't flashy. But it was home. And here, that was enough. A voice in the doorway, "This will be really short." It was raining by the time the first customer arrived. Not the gentle kind of rain that made you want to curl up with a book, but the heavy, cold kind that soaked you through before you even noticed. The kind that turned the streets to mirrors and left the sky a dull, bruised gray. Izuku had opened early that morning. He always did on rainy days. There was something comforting about the warm hum of the espresso machine and the soft clink of mugs against wood when the world outside felt soaked and tired. He'd even lit a cinnamon candle and set out a basket of mini muffins by the register. On the house, a sign read in his neat, slightly shaky handwriting. The bell jingled at 7:15 a.m. Izuku glanced up and froze for a second. The boy who stepped in wasn't soaked like most people rushing out of the rain. No umbrella, no hood, just still. Calm in a way that made him seem carved from the fog outside. His hair was a dusty violet, eyes half-lidded and unreadable. A school uniform hung loosely on his frame, but it didn't match any of the local middle or high schools. He took 2 slow steps in, looked around, then stopped just inside the door. "You open?" he asked, voice low. Gravelly, almost too mature for his age. Izuku blinked back into motion. "Yeah. Come in." The boy stepped fully inside. His shoes squeaked faintly on the floor, but he didn't seem to care. He moved with that same calm, not lazy, just deliberate. Like he had no energy to waste on pretending. Izuku offered a smile. "Take any seat you like. Want something warm?" The boy hesitated for a second longer before answering. "You have chamomile." "I do. I'll take that." Izuku nodded and got to work. It didn't take long to steep the tea, but he moved with extra care, warming the mug just slightly, adding a touch of honey without asking. He'd learned to read people fast. This one didn't look like he wanted to talk. Still, when he set the tea down at the table, he said gently, "Bad morning." The boy stared down at the steam rising from the mug. "It's just a morning." "Sometimes those are the worst kind," Izuku said, not expecting a reply. He didn't get one. The boy stayed for nearly an hour. He didn't speak again. Just sipped his tea slowly, gaze half turned toward the window like he wasn't really seeing it. A few other customers came and went, one sleepy barista from a rival cafe, an old woman walking her tiny dog, but the boy didn't look at any of them. Eventually, Izuku brought over a plate with a single mini muffin on it. The boy glanced at it. Then at him. "It's free," Izuku offered with a shrug. "Rainy day special." Another pause. Then the boy reached for it, slowly. He took one bite. He didn't say thank you. He didn't have to. At 8:32 a.m., the boy stood up and pulled his hood back over his head. The tea mug was empty. The plate had only crumbs left on it. "Come back anytime," Izuku said as the door opened behind him. "You're welcome here." The boy paused. "Hitoshi." Izuku blinked. "Ha. My name," the boy said, without turning. "It's Hitoshi." And then he was gone. Just like the rain. Rules are rules. The rain had stopped. It left behind that clean, wet smell that clung to sidewalks and drifted in through the open cafe windows. The sun peeked out from behind thick clouds like it was still unsure if it was allowed to shine. Izuku hummed softly as he wiped down the counter, sleeves rolled up to his elbows. He was dressed in an oversized forest green sweater and black apron, hair still a little messy from waking up late. A tray of almond croissants cooled on the rack behind him, and the coffee pot hissed quietly on its final brew of the morning rush. The cafe wasn't full, but it wasn't empty either. An elderly woman read a novel by the window. A tired-looking salaryman snored softly over a half-finished latte. And at a corner table, almost hidden in shadow, Hitoshi Shinso was back. He hadn't said much when he walked in, just nodded at Izuku and sat in the same seat as before. No tea today. This time he ordered a mocha with extra whipped cream and looked genuinely surprised when Izuku gave it to him without blinking. You remembered. Izuku grinned. I'm good at remembering. Hitoshi had huffed, almost a laugh. And now he just watched. It happened around 10:17 a.m. The bell above the door jingled too hard, like it had been shoved. A tall man walked in, loud footsteps, cigarette still smoking between his teeth. Mid-30s, maybe, with jagged scars across his face and a scowl that could shatter glass. His coat was ripped. His boots were muddy. And worst of all, he looked angry before anyone said a word. Izuku's eyes tracked him calmly. Morning, he offered, polite as ever. Can I get you something? The man sneered. TCH. Yeah. A DMN refund. Izuku tilted his head. I'm sorry, I don't think I was here last week, the man interrupted, voice rising. You remember me, right? That no villain sign you didn't have. You let those freaks sit here next to me like nothing. A few heads turned. Izuku didn't flinch. Everyone's welcome, sir. That's one of our rules. The man stepped closer to the counter. I don't care about your stupid rules, he growled. You call this a safe space? You're just some punk kid with a martyr complex, playing nice with monsters. The whole cafe went quiet. Even the sleepy salaryman stirred. Hitoshi's eyes narrowed slightly from across the room. Izuku stayed still, hands folded on the counter. I'm going to have to ask you to leave, he said, softly but with no hesitation. This cafe is a place of peace. You're breaking that. The man slammed his hand on the counter. And what if I don't, huh? What if I smash this whole place up? And then crash? He flipped one of the tables. Not by accident. Wood splintered. A mug shattered. The elderly woman flinched in fear. Izuku's expression didn't change. No smile. No soft voice. Just dead calm. I warned you. The next second happened fast. Too fast for anyone to process. Izuku stepped out from behind the counter in one clean motion, ducked low, swept the man's legs from under him, and flipped him with fluid, practiced precision. Before the man could react, Izuku had his arm twisted behind his back, knee pressed lightly into his shoulder blade just enough to keep him still. I said leave, Izuku said, voice cold. I asked nicely. The man froze, stunned. You don't get to threaten people here. Not my customers. Not this place. Izuku didn't shout. He didn't even breathe hard. Just held the man still gently, but firmly as he reached into his pocket and dialed the local patrol line. Yes, Greenlit Café. I have a violent guest who needs to be picked up. Table smashed, no injuries. Yes, I'm fine. He hung up, then slowly let the man up, still watching him, eyes sharp. Sit down, Izuku said. Wait quietly. And somehow the man listened. By the time the patrol heroes arrived and escorted him out, the cafe had returned to a nervous silence. Customers whispered. One offered to pay for the broken table. Another asked if Izuku needed help cleaning. He shook his head. It's okay. I've got it. But as he crouched to pick up the broken pieces, a second pair of hands appeared beside him. Purple sleeves. Fingerless gloves. That was unexpected, Hitoshi muttered, dropping wood into the trash bin. Izuku exhaled softly. Didn't want anyone getting hurt. You didn't hesitate. I couldn't. Silence hung for a second, heavy with meaning. Then Hitoshi stood, brushing off his hands. I get it now. Izuku blinked. Get what? Why people keep coming back? He paused at the counter on his way out, pulling up his hood. See you tomorrow, Midoriya. And this time, Izuku smiled again just a little. See you, Shinso. The man in the scarf. It was a slow afternoon at the Greenlit Café. The kind of quiet that hummed gently beneath the jazz playing in the background. Outside, the sky was overcast but dry. Inside, the warm air smelled faintly of espresso and honey. Izuku stood behind the counter, organizing the jars of loose-leaf tea by color and label, humming softly to himself. Shinso hadn't come in today, not yet, anyway, but Izuku had saved him a chocolate chip muffin just in case. He wouldn't admit it aloud, but he kind of liked seeing the corner table occupied by that sleepy-eyed kid who pretended not to care but always finished his drink down to the last sip. The bell above the door chimed. Izuku looked up. The man who stepped in was tall, dressed in black from head to toe, with tired eyes and messy dark hair that looked like it hadn't seen a comb in days. A long scarf was wrapped lazily around his shoulders. He looked more like a sleep-deprived salaryman than a pro-hero. But something about him made Izuku's breath catch. Welcome in, he said after a pause. You can sit anywhere you'd like. The man gave a small nod, quiet. He didn't say a word as he scanned the cafe, chose the furthest table in the back, and sank into the seat like he was melting into it. He rubbed his eyes with one hand and let out the softest sigh. Izuku didn't recognize him. Not right away. He only noticed that the man looked tired. Like the world had taken too much from him, but he was still showing up anyway. Izuku understood that feeling. He made him a black coffee without being asked instinct and brought it over with a small side of warm lemon cake. The man looked up as Izuku set it down. No sugar. I figured you were the bitter type, Izuku said gently. The man stared at him for a second. Then blinked once, slow. Good guess. Izuku smiled, but said nothing more. He didn't push. Some people just needed a place to sit and exist. 15 minutes passed before the man finally spoke again. You run this place alone. Izuku nodded from behind the counter. Yeah. You're what, 15? Almost 16. Another pause. You the owner? The man leaned back in his seat, studying him. That's rare. A kid running a business like this. Especially one that allows villains. Izuku didn't flinch. It's not about who people are, he said, wiping down the espresso machine. It's about what they do while they're here. If someone follows the rules, they're welcome. The man didn't reply right away. But when he did, his voice was softer. That's a good rule. Izuku finally glanced up, curious. Do you work in law enforcement? The man gave him a look somewhere between amused and exhausted. Something like that. And then, for a heartbeat, Izuku really looked at him. The scarf. The tired eyes. The way he moved. The deep, unshakable calm. Izuku's heart stuttered. Wait, he said, voice barely above a whisper. Are you Aizawa? The man's eyebrow twitched. Huh. You're Eraserhead. The name came out rushed, breathless, somewhere between awe and disbelief. Izuku hadn't fanboyed in years, not since he stopped believing he could ever be a hero, but now it bubbled up inside him like a spark he thought had died. Eraserhead was the one hero who never sought fame. The one who just did the job. The one who never said quirkless kids couldn't be brave. Aizawa looked slightly uncomfortable at the attention. I'm just here for the coffee. Izuku blinked rapidly, embarrassed. Sorry. I didn't mean to. He bowed instinctively. You're actually my favorite hero. Aizawa paused. Why? That stopped Izuku cold. He lifted his head slowly, genuinely surprised by the question. Because you fight without needing people to praise you, he said, quieter now. You protect people, even when they don't see you. You believe in actions over flash. I always admired that. For a long moment, Aizawa said nothing. Then he looked down at the half-finished lemon cake. Good choice, kid. Izuku grinned small, but warm. Thanks. By the time Aizawa stood to leave, the sky outside had gone from gray to pale gold. He pulled his scarf up around his neck, lingering by the door for just a second. You're doing something good here, he said, almost like an afterthought. Izuku blinked. Ha! This cafe. You made something rare. Don't let anyone take it from you. Izuku swallowed hard. I won't. A nod. And then Aizawa was gone. But the space he left behind somehow felt brighter. Some scars don't fade. The sun streamed through the cafe windows in thick golden ribbons, painting the floor in warm lines. It was one of those rare mornings where everything just clicked. The espresso machine hummed contentedly. The scent of cinnamon buns lingered in the air. Izuku moved behind the counter with practiced ease, pouring steamed milk into a ceramic mug, watching the white swirl cloud through the coffee like ink in water. He loved mornings like this. Usually. But today, something sat heavy in his chest. He didn't know why. Not really. Maybe it was the dream, fuzzy around the edges but bitter in tone. Maybe it was the silence that followed it, the kind that felt too much like the old apartment when no one was talking but danger still crept just outside the door. Whatever it was, it tugged at him. Distant but present. Like a memory breathing down his neck. The bell above the door chimed, snapping him back. Morning, came the familiar voice. Shinso. Still half draped in his hoodie, hair messy like he rolled out of bed and came straight here, which, to be fair, he probably did. He glanced around, hands in his pockets, and made his way toward the corner seat without waiting for permission. I saved your muffin, Izuku said quietly. Pulling it from behind the counter. Shinso raised an eyebrow. You always do. Izuku shrugged. You always show up. That earned a small huff. Not quite a laugh, but close enough. As he handed over the muffin, Izuku's hand jerked just slightly. The warm ceramic of the mug nearly slipped from his fingers. He caught it, but his breath caught too. He blinked. Focus. Shinso noticed. You good? Izuku forced a quick smile. Just clumsy today. Shinso didn't reply. Just gave him a look. One of those quiet, unblinking stares like he was piecing something together but wasn't sure if it was his business to ask. It wasn't. And Izuku didn't offer anything more. A few minutes passed. Izuku returned to the counter, rearranging sugar packets with more focus than necessary. The cafe buzzed gently with small conversations. Peaceful. Ordinary. But he felt off. Like he'd left a window open in his mind and cold air was seeping in. Behind him, Shinso broke the silence again. You seem different today. Izuku didn't look up. Do I? Yeah. Quieter. And you're already quiet. Izuku gave a small smile without teeth. Bad dream. That made him pause, but just for a second. Nothing important, he said lightly. It happens. Shinso studied him for a moment. Then leaned back in his chair and reached for the muffin. All right. That was it. No pressure. No lecture. No digging. Just all right. Izuku didn't realize how much he appreciated that until the tension in his shoulders loosened ever so slightly. The rest of the morning moved gently. Shinso stayed longer than usual, sipping tea and watching the world go by. Izuku returned to cleaning, checking the register, and moving about with the calm rhythm he'd built for himself. No one raised their voice. No one broke anything. No one questioned why Izuku flinched when he thought no one saw. And for now, that was enough. The afternoon crowd came and went. Office workers. Students. A local DLVRY driver who always asked for whatever strongest and never clarified if he meant coffee or tea. A pair of pro heroes even stopped in low-key ones Izuku didn't recognize, but they followed the rules and left a generous tip. By late afternoon, the sunlight was starting to fade, washing the cafe in warm orange tones. Izuku was wiping down a table when the door slammed open with a loud bang. The bell above it nearly flew off the hinge. Yo, nerd. You alive in here or what? Izuku didn't even look up. Hi, Kaken. Bakugo stomped in like he owned the place. His uniform jacket was hanging off one shoulder, his hair more explosive than usual, and he looked like he'd run the whole way over. He paused near the door, squinting around. Why's it so DMN quiet in here today? It's always quiet in here. Yeah, but today it's like funeral quiet. Izuku finally looked up, raising an eyebrow. Do you want a coffee or a cookie or something? I want an answer, Deku. Bakugo strode to the counter. You look like hell. That's not new. I'm serious. Izuku sighed and poured him a cup of the house blend without being asked. He knew Bakugo wouldn't touch anything sugary, but he always accepted black coffee scalding, no cream, no sugar. Brutal, just like him. I didn't sleep great. That's all, Izuku said. It happens. Bakugo narrowed his eyes. TCH, dream stuff again. Izuku's hand froze on the coffee pot just for a second. Bakugo noticed. You gotta stop bottling it up, man, he muttered. You think I didn't know you have nightmares about the sludge villain? Or after that rooftop? That rooftop being the moment All Might told Izuku he couldn't be a hero. Yeah. Hard to forget. Izuku pushed the coffee toward him. I'm not bottling anything up. I just don't want to talk about it right now. Bakugo didn't argue. He just stared at him, tension crackling around him like static electricity. Then, in a rare display of restraint, he sat down. Fine. But I'm hanging out here today, he said, like it was some kind of punishment. You clearly SCK at taking breaks, and you look like you're gonna collapse. Izuku blinked. You're staying. You have training. Done already. He kicked his feet up on a nearby stool. Besides, I know when something's off with you. You get all robotic when you're stressed. I do not. You didn't even argue when I kicked the door open. Izuku opened his mouth. Closed it again. Point taken, he muttered. Bakugo sipped his coffee and scowled. Needs more bitterness. It's literally black. It doesn't get more bitter. Exactly. They sat in companionable silence after that, Bakugo scrolling through something on his phone while Izuku returned to wiping down the already clean counter. But even without words, there was comfort in having someone there. Someone who knew not the full story, maybe, but enough. Someone who didn't expect him to smile when he didn't feel like it. The bell jingled again, and Shinso slipped inside hood up, hands deep in his pockets. He blinked when he saw Bakugo. Bakugo glanced over. Purple. You again. Explodey, Shinso said flatly, then moved past him to his usual table. Izuku watched this exchange with a faint smirk. You two met already. Briefly, Shinso muttered, dropping into his seat. He threatened to blow up my backpack. Bakugo scoffed. You looked sketchy. I am sketchy. Izuku chuckled quietly, the first real smile he'd managed all day. And for a while, the cafe settled into a different kind of quiet, not the eerie stillness of earlier, but the soft, steady kind. Like a storm had passed, and calm was slowly creeping in. He was still tired. Still a little haunted. But with Kaken guarding the front like a grumpy watchdog, and Shinso brooding peacefully in the corner, the weight on Izuku's chest felt just a little bit lighter. "Wait, you already come here." It had been a calm kind of afternoon. The kind where the sunlight spilled across the wooden floors in lazy strips and the quiet hum of soft music blended perfectly with the clink of dishes being washed behind the counter. Izuku had just finished wiping down the espresso machine, lost in the steady rhythm of his little cafe world. Then slam. The door banged open, the bell above it rattling like it was trying to flee. "Guys. This is the place I saw on that cozy cafe thread. Isn't it cute?" A blur of pink hair and boundless energy practically exploded into the room. Izuku's hands froze mid-motion as four loud teenagers piled in after her. One with jagged red hair, another with lazy black eyes. An elbow tape, a blonde with a smile that screamed trouble, and of course, the pink one in the lead. "Whoa," the redhead said. "This place is kinda peaceful." "Yeah, and it smells awesome," said the blonde, already peeking at the pastry display. "Yo, do you think they sell like, secret menu items?" "That's a thing, right?" The pink girl Mina spun in place, beaming. "I knew this place would be perfect. Little indie cafe, aesthetic wood and plants, mysterious barista guy with green curls." Izuku blinked. Hi. "Oh," she whipped around. "Are you the owner? The one who runs this place? You look young." "I am." "Cool. I'm Mina Ashido. These are my friends Kiri, Denki, Siro. We're from UA. And this is our first time here." Izuku gave a polite little nod, still a little caught off guard by the sudden energy surge. He was about to welcome them properly when, "Boy," came a familiar voice from the corner booth. "Keep it down, extras." Mina blinked. "Wait, Bakugo." The whole squad turned. Bakugo sat with his arms crossed, expression as sour as ever, clearly not thrilled to be spotted. "What the hell are you all doing here? You know this place?" Kirishima asked. "Yeah. So. Bro, you've been coming to this cozy little cafe and didn't say a word." Kaminari gaped. "What else are you hiding? Do you knit too? I'll blow up your stupid shoes." Mina gasped and spun toward Izuku. "Wait, you know Bakugo?" Izuku blinked again. Why yeah. We went to middle school together." "Oh," Siro drawled. "This just got interesting." "Shut up," Bakugo snapped, already marching over. "Don't make this weird." Izuku rubbed the back of his neck. He didn't know these people. They were loud. Friendly, sure, but he wasn't used to this. His cafe was usually a place of quiet comfort, not five teenagers exploring like it was a funhouse. "Do you want to order something?" he offered. "Yes," Mina said, instantly excited again. "Everything looks so good. You made all this yourself?" He gave a small nod. "I bake fresh every morning." Kirishima grinned. "Man, that's awesome. Respect." "Thanks." Bakugo returned to his usual seat, grumbling the whole way, while the rest of the squad piled into a booth and started arguing over who got which muffin. Izuku slowly relaxed. They were loud, yeah, but they were laughing. Happy. Safe. He could live with that. Later, as Mina took a selfie in front of the ivy-wrapped window and Siro filmed a dumb video of Kaminari pretending to be a dramatic cafe reviewer, Izuku caught Bakugo watching the chaos with a flat, unreadable look. "You didn't tell them about this place," Izuku said quietly, coming over with his usual tray of drinks. Bakugo shrugged. "Didn't want to share." Izuku raised an eyebrow. "It's quiet here," Bakugo muttered, glancing away. "They're loud." Izuku set the tray down. "They're your friends." "Yeah. They're annoying." But he didn't look angry. "Not really." Izuku chuckled softly and returned behind the counter, a new warmth blooming in his chest. Maybe it wasn't so bad to let the noise in every once in a while. Blue flame and black coffee. It was nearly closing time. The once warm, golden light of the day had melted into deep hues of indigo and quiet. Most of the lights inside the cafe had been dimmed, save for the soft amber bulbs behind the counter and the tiny fairy lights strung along the window. Izuku stood alone at the register, gently wiping down the counters for the fourth time that night. There hadn't been any customers for the past hour. The cafe always slowed down like this once the sky got dark. Most people were home by now. Izuku liked this time of day. The quiet. The solitude. The stillness of the air. So when the door opened with a soft chime and a breath of cold night air, it startled him. A figure stepped inside. Tall. Gaunt. Pale. Wearing a hooded jacket with the collar turned up, dark jeans, and staples. The stranger had visible scars. Rough, burnt-looking patches of skin stitched together crudely along his neck and jaw. The air seemed to grow heavier the moment he stepped inside. Izuku blinked, instinctively straightening. Hi. The man's eyes were sharp. Tired. Blue. He looked around slowly, like taking in the place. He said, voice low and rough. Didn't think it'd be open this late. We're still open for another 20 minutes, Izuku replied, carefully keeping his voice calm. You're welcome to sit. As long as you follow the rules. Right, the man drawled, stepping closer. No fighting. No discrimination. No property damage. His eyes flicked to the little sign by the counter. Guess that includes no burning stuff, huh? Izuku didn't flinch, but his grip on the cloth tightened slightly. Yeah. That too. The man Dabi, though Izuku didn't know that yet, let out a low chuckle and sauntered toward a corner booth. He didn't seem particularly interested in causing trouble. Just existing. Izuku waited a beat before cautiously asking, can I get you something? Coffee. Tea. Something warm. Dabi leaned his head back slightly, eyes flickering toward the low lights above them. Black coffee. Nothing fancy. Coming up. Izuku moved quietly behind the counter. The soft hiss of the machine and clink of ceramic cups filled the air. He could feel the man's gaze on him, but didn't look up. You're young, Dabi said suddenly. Izuku glanced over. I guess. You run this place alone. Yeah. Dabi let out a small exhale, somewhere between a scoff and a laugh. Must have been through a lot to end up here. Izuku didn't reply. Didn't flinch. Didn't explain. He just set the black coffee on the counter and slid it gently forward. Here. Dabi rose from the booth and approached, wrapping scarred fingers around the mug. His nails were blackened at the edges. His hands were calloused, rough like they'd held fire too long. He took a sip. Seemed surprised. Not bad. Izuku just nodded. Silence fell again. Not uncomfortable. But not comfortable either. Just quiet. After a moment, Dabi set the cup down and tilted his head, eyes narrowing slightly as he studied the boy behind the counter. You've got a weird aura, kid. Izuku raised an eyebrow. I get that a lot. Dabi smirked, sharp and thin. I bet you do. They stood there, two strangers in the glow of low lights and the scent of coffee beans. No names exchanged. No pasts unpacked. Just quiet acknowledgement. Dabi finished his coffee, set a crumpled bill on the counter, and pulled his hood back up. He paused at the door. Don't get yourself burned, he said. Softly. This world doesn't like people who make safe places. Then he was gone. Izuku stood alone again, the warmth of the cafe pushing back the chill Dabi left behind. He didn't know who that man was. But he had a feeling it wouldn't be the last time he saw him. The usual, please morning light spilled into the greenlit cafe like a gentle wave, painting soft golden patterns across the wooden floors. The scent of warm pastries, fresh coffee, and cinnamon drifted through the air, wrapping around every corner like a comforting hug. Izuku had been up since dawn. As usual. The scones were cooling on the wire rack. The cinnamon rolls were almost done. The espresso machine had been primed, wiped down, and tested twice. Everything was exactly where it needed to be. He was alone, but not lonely. The quiet hum of morning prep had become his rhythm. The bell above the door jingled, and Izuku turned instinctively with a polite smile. "Hey," said a voice he was getting used to. "Got any of those sweet bean buns today?" It was Hitoshi Shinso, hood up, hands in his pockets, eyes still half asleep. Izuku blinked. "You're back early." Shinso shrugged. "Didn't sleep." "Still. You're always here afternoon." "I was craving coffee," he muttered, ambling to the counter and eyeing the display case. "And this place?" Izuku felt a small warmth stir in his chest. "Well, you're in luck. I just finished a fresh batch." Shinso took a seat by the window, the same seat he always chose. Not too close to the door. Not too far from the counter. Safe. Izuku brought him a tray coffee, black, with a hint of nutmeg like he preferred, and 2 sweet bean buns dusted lightly with powdered sugar. "You remembered," Shinso murmured, eyes flicking up. "I remember everyone's order," Izuku said simply. "It's my job." But it wasn't just that. It was comforting. Knowing these things. Remembering the tiny details. It made people feel welcome. That mattered. The bell jingled again, louder this time, and Izuku turned in time to see the chaos arrive. "Hey midoriya." Mina practically sang, holding the door open like a grand reveal. "Guess who's back with more chaos?" Izuku's eyes widened. Kirishima, Kaminari, and Siro followed close behind, grinning like this was a field trip and Izuku was the teacher they were going to annoy for fun. Behind them, Bakugo stalked in, hands in his pockets, already glaring. "Oi, extras, keep your volume under 80 decibels or I'm gonna staple your mouths shut with the cookie tongs." "You said that yesterday, bro," Kaminari said cheerfully. "And I meant it." Izuku sighed quietly and waved. "Welcome back." "Your muffins are like crack," Siro said, leaning over the counter. "Do you have a secret ingredient?" "It's cinnamon," Izuku said blandly. "Lies," Mina whispered. The 4 teens swarmed a booth while Bakugo went to his usual seat in the corner with the air of someone enduring a punishment he half chose. Shinso quietly sipped his coffee, side-eyeing the chaos without getting involved. Izuku moved through the motions, pouring drinks, warming scones, chatting when needed. But he didn't push conversation. He never did. He just made sure people had what they needed. A calm bubble in the middle of the storm. "You good?" Bakugo asked quietly when Izuku passed his table, delivering his bitter coffee and matcha muffin. Izuku blinked. "Yeah." "Why?" "You're tense." "I'm always tense." "TCH," Bakugo leaned back. "I can tell the difference." Izuku didn't respond. But he did let out a quiet breath once he got back behind the counter. He was okay. This was okay. Loud, yes. A little overwhelming. But the cafe was full of life. Laughter. Clattering forks and heated debates about whether Siro or Kirishima had better luck at claw machines. And then the bell jingled again. Izuku looked up out of instinct. But it was just a DLVRY. Some new ingredients. He signed quickly and returned to his post, eyes scanning the room like he always did. Still calm. Still safe. Still his. Heroes Need Coffee. Too late morning rolled into early afternoon, and the Greenlit Café was still buzzing. Shinso had already left, nodding Izuku a quiet, thanks, on his way out. The Baku squad had also cleared out, dragged away by Mina after a heated debate about who owed whom a smoothie. Now, the cafe had settled into a gentle rhythm. Soft music hummed from the speakers, and a few regulars were typing on laptops or quietly chatting over pastries. Izuku was rinsing out the espresso pitcher when the bell above the door chimed again. He glanced up, expecting another student or salary worker, but instead, a swirl of violet and black entered the cafe like it was a stage. Tall heels. Crimson lipstick. A confident sway of the hips. Midnight. Izuku blinked once, then composed himself like he hadn't just watched a pro hero known for weaponized stuntmen walk into his shop on a Tuesday. She didn't even hesitate, her eyes swept the room, and then she made a beeline for the counter. "Good afternoon, darling," she said, voice rich and purring. Izuku gave her a polite, professional smile. "Good afternoon. Welcome to the Greenlit Café. What can I get for you?" "Oh, how proper," she mused, resting one elbow on the counter and propping her chin on her hand. "Aren't you a sweet one?" "I'm the owner," Izuku said simply, used to odd reactions. "My name's Izuku Midoriya. Let me know if you have any allergies." Midnight raised an eyebrow, amused. "Straight to business, huh?" He nodded. "It's how I work." Her smile widened. "All right then, Izuku. Surprise me. Something with a kick. And sweet. Like me. Got it." He turned, already moving to the espresso machine. Behind him, he could feel her eyes on him, but it wasn't uncomfortable. Just observant. Curious. Izuku whipped up a cinnamon mocha with a bit of chili powder for a spicy twist, dusted it lightly with cocoa, and added a side of lemon shortbread. When he set it in front of her, she looked genuinely impressed. "Oh ho. That smells dangerous," she purred. "You sure you're not trying to charm me, Midoriya?" "Not intentionally," Izuku replied evenly. "But I'm glad you like it." Midnight laughed, genuinely, and took a sip. Her eyes lit up. "Oh. Oh, this is divine." Izuku's lips tugged into a small, proud smile. "Thank you." She sipped again, more thoughtfully this time. "You're young, aren't you? Not even in you, eh?" "No. Shame. You'd make a great support team specialist." She paused. "You know a lot about people." "I know how to make them feel safe," he said softly, wiping down the counter. That gave her pause. She watched him a moment longer. "You really do, don't you?" Another sip. "I like this place," she said after a moment. "No pressure. No judgment. And the best coffee I've had all month." Izuku gave a tiny bow. "Come back anytime." "I will," she said, standing up and finishing her cup. "And next time, I want something decadent. Make me regret it." "I'll keep that in mind." She winked at him before sauntering toward the door. Just before leaving, she paused and looked back. "Oh, Midnight. Or Professor Kayama, technically. But you can call me Nemuri if you really want to." Izuku blinked. "I think I'll stick with Midnight." Her laugh echoed as she left. Izuku stood quietly for a moment, the scent of cinnamon and cocoa still lingering in the air. Another day. Another hero. Another reason to keep this place running. The Greenlit Café wasn't just a business. It was a haven. And it was his. Feathers in the wind, late afternoon sunlight poured in through the cafe windows, casting golden streaks across the tables. The lull between rush hours was Izuku's favorite time, quiet, steady, predictable. He was restocking the front pastry case with lemon buns when the door chimed again. He didn't look up right away. "Be with you in just a sec," he called automatically, wiping a bit of powdered sugar off his fingers. "No rush," came a voice, smooth, easygoing, almost amused. "Looks like you've got a good thing going here." That voice. Izuku straightened slowly. Standing at the counter, hands in his pockets, leaned slightly to one side like he didn't have a single care in the world was Hawks. Yes. That Hawks. Red wings tucked loosely behind him. Hair tousled. Visor pushed up to reveal golden eyes that sparkled with a kind of lazy sharpness. Izuku blinked. Welcome to the Greenlit Café. Hawks gave a small, satisfied nod. Knew I smelled cinnamon and peace of mind. Thought I was imagining it. Izuku's lips quirked. You're not. He stepped behind the counter, back into professional mode. Can I get you something? What do you recommend for a guy who's running on 2 hours of sleep and 3 press conferences? Izuku considered. Double shot espresso with whipped cream. And something sweet. To trick your brain into thinking you're being nice to yourself. Hawks chuckled. Man, you are good. As Izuku got to work, Hawks wandered over to the menu board, reading it without reading it. His eyes were more on the shop itself. Every little corner. Every detail. Didn't expect to find a place like this in the middle of the city, he said casually. You run this by yourself? I do. Impressive. You don't look much older than what, 15? Izuku didn't answer right away. Just added whipped cream with a careful swirl, then passed the drink over in a tall glass mug. 15 and a half, he said finally. Hawks whistled low. And here I thought I was an early bloomer. He took a sip and raised his eyebrows. Whoa. Okay. That's dangerously good. Izuku gave a small, proud nod. Glad you like it. Hawks didn't move away. Just leaned on the counter a little. Wings shifting slightly with each breath. Place is nice. Real peaceful. Strict rules. Izuku nodded. No fighting. No discrimination. No destruction of property. Doesn't matter if you're a hero, villain, or neither. Hawks looked at him over the rim of his glass. That's bold. You ever had trouble? Izuku shrugged lightly. Not often. Not a lie. Just not the whole truth. The winged hero hummed, setting his drink down. You got guts, kid. Izuku said nothing. Hawks didn't push. Just let the silence settle, comfortable and quiet. After a moment, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a feather. Izuku blinked. Here, Hawks said, handing it to him. For luck. Or decoration. Or marketing. Izuku hesitated then accepted it carefully. Thanks. No problem. He stretched, flexing his wings. Might drop in again sometime. Gotta keep an eye on the good spots, you know. You're welcome anytime. Hawks gave a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. That's a dangerous thing to say to a guy like me. And with that, he turned, heading toward the door. Just before he stepped out, he glanced over his shoulder. Take care, midoriya. Izuku stiffened. He hadn't told him his name. But Hawks was already gone, red feathers catching the wind like sparks. Izuku looked down at the feather in his hand. Maybe it was for luck. Or maybe it was a warning. Either way, it was his now. Aside of explosions with that coffee, the morning rush had faded into a soft hum of background music and gentle clinks of mugs and spoons. Izuku was wiping down the counter, content in the lull. He liked the calm. The way the cafe breathed with him. Safe, predictable. Which, of course, meant that calm was about to get obliterated. Slam. The door flew open like it owed someone money, and in stormed Katsuki Bakugo school uniform jacket half-buttoned, scowl already in place, and muttering explosive curses under his breath. Izuku didn't even blink. Good morning, Kaken. Katsuki grunted. Shut up. Coffee. Hot. Sweet. Now. You're extra cranky today, Izuku said, already grabbing a mug. Rough morning. You mean every morning? I'm surrounded by idiots. He dropped into his usual spot at the bar with a thud and slumped dramatically onto the counter. Izuku raised an eyebrow. Did Mineta try to talk to someone again? No. Worse. Katsuki growled. Ashido's got some new group project idea for team building, and it involves karaoke. Karaoke, Deku. In front of the whole DMN class. Izuku smiled to himself. I think you do great. You have a very powerful voice. I swear to God, and what's the rest of the class saying? They're all into it. Even Sparky. Like we've got time for this CRP. Katsuki huffed and stared at the steam rising from his mug. They're all just extras. Running around like this is some slice-of-life anime. Izuku blinked slowly. Technically, this scene is kinda giving slice of life, you know. Katsuki's glare could have melted a steel beam. You're lucky this coffee is good, he muttered. Izuku passed over a warm pastry, just because. Here. On the house. TCH, charity case. You stormed in like a tired dragon. You clearly needed a cinnamon roll. Katsuki didn't respond immediately. But he took the pastry. He always took the pastry. For a while, they sat in comfortable silence. Katsuki tapped a rhythm against his mug while Izuku checked on the simmering caramel. Then, softly, hey. You ever get bored of this? Izuku paused. Of the cafe. Katsuki didn't look at him. Yeah. Like doing this every day. Same stuff. No explosions. No action. Izuku thought for a moment. No. I think I did enough exploding when I was younger. Katsuki finally looked up. There was a weird flicker in his eyes like he wanted to ask something, but didn't know how. Instead, he just said, "You're weird." Izuku smiled. You've said that every time you come here. Because it's true. Katsuki pushed the empty mug forward. More coffee. And don't skimp on the sugar. Yes, Kaken. And shut up. A day to breathe. The Greenlit Café was closed. It was a rare sight, almost shocking to the regulars. A few had stopped short outside the shop that morning, blinking at the handwritten sign taped to the glass door. Closed for the day, back tomorrow. I am simple. Polite. Personal. Inside, everything was already spotless and still. The counters gleamed. The chairs were tucked in. The tiny whiteboard still had the last featured drink scrawled in green marker, Midoriya's maple matcha, limited time. Izuku stood on the sidewalk across the street, hands in his pockets. It felt weird not going in. Like he'd forgotten something, an entire part of himself left behind. But he needed this. So he turned his back on the building he loved and walked into the city. His first stop was the bakery 3 blocks away. An older woman ran it, her glasses always a little askew and flour dusted in her curly gray hair like snow. He didn't come often. Running his own cafe meant he didn't usually buy baked goods, but she greeted him like an old friend. Well, well. Look who's free from his kingdom for once. Izuku smiled shyly. Hi, Ms. Hoshino. Just taking a break today. Good. You work too hard for someone your age. Sit down. I'm making you something sweet. He ended up with a warm chocolate croissant and a cup of tea he didn't order but somehow needed. He sat at a corner table by the window, watching people rush by outside. Ms. Hoshino didn't charge him. You've got kind eyes, she said simply, waving off his wallet. Reminds me of my son. He was a hero once. Came home one day and opened a music store instead. Izuku's throat tightened a little, but he just bowed and thanked her. After that, he let the city guide him. He walked without destination, stopping when something caught his eye. A street performer playing a violin with quirk-powered illusions of butterflies. A second-hand bookstore tucked in a basement. A tiny cat perched on a mailbox, sunning itself like royalty. Izuku found himself smiling. More than once, someone recognized him. Not as the quirkless kid from middle school, or Deku, or a would-be hero, but as the barista from that peaceful little cafe near the edge of the commercial district. "Hey, you're the guy from the Greenlit Café, right? Those lemon scones changed my life, man. You still do that cinnamon honey latte. My roommate talks about it like it's a religion." He laughed, blushed, thanked them all. One little girl even offered him a crayon drawing of the cafe with, "Best place ever," scrawled in pink marker. Izuku folded it carefully and put it in his hoodie pocket. By early afternoon, he ended up in a local park. Not the big touristy one with fountains and fountains of children screaming joyfully. A quieter one. With a duck pond, benches, and too many squirrels. He settled on a wooden bench near the water, half hidden under a tree. Just as he took a deep breath and closed his eyes, "I thought you didn't know how to sit still." Izuku blinked his eyes open. Katsuki Bakugo stood a few feet away, hands jammed into his pants pockets, brows furrowed with what might have been concern in disguise. "Kaken." Izuku blinked. "What are you doing here?" "Lunch run," Bakugo muttered. "Then I saw your frizzy head through a tree." Izuku gave a small laugh. "That's not exactly subtle. TCH. You'd be surprised how often it works." Bakugo came closer, hesitating only slightly before flopping down onto the bench beside him. For a while, they sat in silence, the way only old childhood friends could. "You really closed the place today?" Bakugo asked, voice low. "Yeah," Izuku said. "Thought it was time. Been a while since I've had a day." Katsuki made a noise in his throat like an annoyed scoff, but he didn't argue. Instead, he reached into his bag and pulled something out, a paper bag, slightly worn. "Here." Izuku blinked. "What's this?" "Taiyaki," Bakugo muttered, not meeting his eyes. "From that place you like." Izuku's chest squeezed. "Kaken, thank you." "Shut up," Katsuki said gruffly. "Just eat it." Izuku took a bite. It was warm and sweet, and he realized he hadn't stopped smiling for most of the day. Later, Bakugo left for a group training session, muttering something about extras and their coordination problems. Izuku stayed behind in the park a little longer, sketching drink ideas in a tiny notepad he kept in his pocket. A voice startled him mid-sketch. "Mind if I sit?" He looked up and saw Tsuyu Azui, holding a small bento box and wearing her casual hoodie instead of her school uniform. "Oh. Sure, go ahead," Izuku said quickly. Tsuyu sat quietly, then offered him a rice ball from her lunch. "You looked like you could use a snack," she said. Actually just had taiyaki, I brought extras." Izuku laughed softly and accepted. "Thank you." She nodded. They ate together in calm silence, the kind that didn't need to be filled. "You're kind," she said suddenly. Izuku blinked. "Huh. You didn't ask why I was here. Or what I'm doing outside school. Or talk just to fill the air." "Oh sorry, I like that," she finished, interrupting softly. Izuku flushed a little. "Oh. So you've finished her bento. Your cafe is nice. It feels safe there." He felt that again, that swell of something deep in his chest. "That's all I want it to be." She stood. "Then you're doing a good job." And with a small wave, she left. The sun dipped low by the time Izuku wandered back toward home. He passed the market again, waved to Ms. Hoshino who was sweeping outside, and detoured past a florist just because the window display made him smile. The streetlights flickered on, one by one. He found himself standing behind the cafe before he even realized it. The back alley was quiet, a little breezy. No cars, no customers. Just the back door, the recycling bin, and the familiar outline of the building that meant safety. He didn't go inside. He just looked up. He didn't know why. Some instinct. Some twinge of awareness. And there, on the roof, a figure. Tall. Lean. Wings tucked behind his back, catching the last bits of golden light like fire. Hawks. The pro-hero stood still, arms folded, his gaze directed toward the cafe, no, toward Izuku. Watching. Calm. Neutral. Unreadable. Izuku didn't move. Hawks tilted his head just slightly in greeting. And then, with a barely audible flutter of feathers, he vanished over the roofline. Izuku stepped forward slowly and found something small fluttering at the back entrance. A single red feather. He bent down, picked it up gently. It was warm in his hands, almost like it held a heartbeat of its own. His mind spun. Was this a warning? A thank you? A check-in? He didn't know. But something about it made his pulse slow instead of spike. He tucked the feather into the pocket of his hoodie, next to the crayon drawing from earlier. When he finally entered the cafe, he didn't turn on the lights. He just stood in the dark for a moment, breathing in the scent of wood polish and honeyed coffee. His sanctuary. His cafe. His home. The echo of a dream. The rain had come and gone that morning, leaving the streets of Muzutafu washed and glistening under a pale afternoon sun. The clouds had thinned out just enough to let light trickle through the windows of the Greenlit cafe, soft and golden across the counters and tabletops. Izuku was behind the counter, a pale green apron tied around his waist and a pencil tucked behind one ear. The scent of fresh cinnamon rolls lingered faintly in the air, mingling with the smooth hum of the cafe's old record player spinning a mellow jazz track. A few regulars dotted the room, a pair of college students whispering over notebooks in the corner, a quiet office worker nursing an espresso and reading a paperback. It was calm. And then the door opened with a soft chime. Izuku didn't look up right away. He was mid-pour, focused on filling a takeout cup without spilling any foam. "Welcome to the Greenlit Café," he called out gently, his usual line. "You can take a seat anywhere, I'll be with you in a..." He turned. His voice caught somewhere in his throat. Skinny All Might stood just inside the doorway. Not the towering figure from billboards and commercials, but the real one. Worn thin, drawn around the edges, wrapped in a long coat with the collar turned up. His cheeks were a little hollow, eyes tired, and his once proud hair was pulled back into a low, neat ponytail. He wasn't trying to draw attention. Sunglasses hung loosely from one hand. For a moment, neither of them said a word. Izuku's heart did something strange in his chest. Not panic. Not joy. Just a quiet twist, like something old turning over beneath his ribs. All Might looked around the cafe slowly, like he was seeing a ghost. "This place yours?" he asked finally, his voice just barely above a whisper. Izuku nodded once. "Yeah." All Might gave a faint, dry smile. "I thought I recognized the name. Greenlit." A beat passed. "You remembered?" Izuku asked, and it came out more surprised than anything. He hadn't expected that. Hadn't expected him, at all. "I don't forget many things, midoriya." Izuku flinched at the name. Not because it hurt but because it sounded so distant now, like a title that didn't fit anymore. He cleared his throat and gestured to the bar seats. "You can sit, if you want. I'll get you something warm." All Might sat carefully, like he wasn't used to stillness. "Surprise me." Izuku went to work. It gave him something to do with his hands. He didn't know what to say. This was the man who shattered his childhood dream in a single sentence. The man he had idolized, cried over, chased through city streets. And now he was just another customer. Izuku made a honey black tea with milk and a slice of lemon, gentle, comforting. He slid the cup forward without ceremony. All Might took it with both hands. "You've grown," he said softly. "You were just a kid when we last talked." Izuku gave a quiet chuckle, not bitter. "Yeah. I guess I had to." The silence stretched again. "Not hostile. Just careful." "You didn't go to you, eh?" All Might said slowly, like he wasn't sure if he should bring it up. Izuku shook his head. Didn't see the point, after that conversation. All Might's shoulders slumped slightly. Izuku didn't press. He didn't need to. He wasn't angry, not anymore. He had made peace with the path he'd taken. The cafe was his. His work. His dream. And no one, not even All Might, could take that from him. I didn't come here to rehash that," All Might murmured, fingers tightening slightly around the cup. "I heard about this cafe through the grapevine. Pro and villain friendly. No fighting. Just peace. That's the goal," Izuku said. "No costumes. No quirks. Just people." A quiet nod. All Might sipped the tea. His lips twitched in mild surprise. "This is really good." Izuku smiled faintly. "Thanks." For a while, they just existed in the same space, two people who had once meant the world to each other in different ways. The sound of the record player filled the gaps. Outside, the street was busy with life, but in here, time felt slower. Eventually, All Might spoke again. "You've made something good here. Something real." Izuku didn't look up from where he was wiping down the counter. "I'm trying." "You succeeded." They didn't speak again after that. All Might finished his tea in slow sips, stood quietly, and placed a few crisp bills under the empty cup. He didn't linger, didn't say goodbye. Just nodded once, an old soldier's salute, and slipped out into the street. Izuku stood still behind the counter for a while. He didn't know how to feel. But he didn't feel broken. That had to mean something. Later that night, the cafe was dark, closed for the evening. The wind rustled gently through the alley beside the building, brushing past the rooftop like fingers through hair. Perched on a nearby ledge, a single feather, red and light as breath, quivered in the breeze. It shifted. Twitched once. And listened. Whisper in the wings. Morning broke slow, gray, and quiet. The kind of day that felt suspended in time, neither warm nor cold, neither sunny nor rainy. Just still. Izuku opened the cafe like usual. He unlocked the door with practiced ease, flipping the closed sign to open with a soft click. The scent of roasted beans and vanilla hung in the air from the prep the night before. He walked through the space like always, flicking on the lights, adjusting chairs, setting trays into the pastry case. Everything was normal. But something in the atmosphere wasn't. The cafe felt watched. He paused by the espresso machine, fingers tightening around the portafilter. His eyes drifted toward the front windows, where the overcast sky glared dully through the glass. Nothing there. He shook the feeling off. It wasn't unusual to feel off now and then. Maybe he was just tired. He'd stayed up late sketching menu ideas, and he hadn't really eaten properly that morning. Still, the feeling lingered like steam that refused to dissipate. By 8:15 a.m., the first few regulars came in. Mrs. Kondo, who always asked for her tea just barely hot. A teenager in his hero school uniform, clearly not but enthusiastic all the same. A salaryman who never said a word, just nodded gratefully and typed away at his laptop. Izuku wore his usual smile, his apron tied neatly around his waist, and served them all with practiced grace. He was wiping down the counter when it happened. A movement in the corner of his eye, barely a flicker. He glanced up, half expecting to see someone standing at the door, but there was no one there. Instead, it was something else. A single crimson feather rested near the far end of the window bench. At first, it looked like decoration too clean, too sharp. But Izuku knew birds didn't leave feathers like that. Not that color. Not that size. And definitely not tucked into the crease of a windowsill like it had been placed there. He slowly approached it, dried cloth still in hand. He stared at the feather. His fingers hovered above it before he finally picked it up. It was weightless. Warm to the touch. Too warm. He turned it over once, then again, then glanced around the shop. No one noticed. Everyone was chatting, sipping their drinks, minding their business. But his heart was beating faster. He knew about hawks. Of course he did. Everyone knew Japan's #2 hero. But he also remembered something small, something he'd read once in a quiet corner of the internet: hawks could see through his feathers. Hear through them. Feel vibrations. Monitor. Izuku swallowed and gently slipped the feather into his apron pocket. He didn't panic. Didn't even flinch. But now he knew. He was being watched. Not maliciously. Not violently. But purposefully. And he had no idea why. The rest of the day passed with a thread of tension pulled taut just beneath the surface. Izuku kept smiling, kept making drinks and taking orders, but his eyes darted toward reflective surfaces more often. He watched shadows outside the windows. Rooftops. Nothing appeared out of place. But every so often, he'd swear the air shifted like a presence brushed past the café, just close enough to notice, but far enough not to see. When evening came and the last customer waved goodbye, Izuku stood alone in the quiet shop, back against the counter, staring at the feather in his palm. Why would a pro-hero keep an eye on him? What was Hawks looking for? Was he here for protection? Or suspicion? The lights buzzed faintly overhead. Izuku sighed and tucked the feather away again. He moved through the end-of-day tasks slower than usual, wiping down tables, sweeping, resetting the display case. Outside, the city was already dimming. Streetlights blinked on in staggered rhythm. He'd just turned the cafe's sign to "closed" when the bell above the door rang. Izuku's head snapped up. Someone stepped inside, despite the sign. Tall. Lean. Familiar. A flash of patchwork skin and a bored, slow blink. "Yo," Dabi said, stepping inside like he hadn't just ignored the closed sign completely. Izuku didn't move. "I was about to lock up," he said evenly. Dabi's eyes drifted over the interior, unbothered. "Saw the lights still on. Thought I'd drop by. You always keep it this warm in here." Izuku crossed his arms. "It's a cafe, not a freezer." Dabi huffed a quiet laugh. "Fair." He made no move to sit. Just stood near the doorway, the shadows from outside casting strange shapes across his jaw. Izuku tilted his head slightly. "You planning to order something?" "Yeah." Dabi finally moved, slow and casual, toward the counter. "You still got that stupid cinnamon tea?" "You mean the one you said tasted like hot dirt?" Izuku asked. A pause. "That's the one." Izuku turned to make it without another word. Despite everything, despite the tension still humming in his bones from the feather earlier, his hands moved with practiced ease. "Hot water. Infuser. A touch of honey." "Rough day?" he asked without turning. Dabi snorted. "You could say that. Villain work tiring." "Everything's tiring." Izuku placed the tea on the counter. Dabi didn't pick it up right away. He just stared at the steam curling from the mug. "Place smells like peace," he muttered. Izuku blinked. "What?" "This place," Dabi said again, voice quieter now. "Smells like peace. Like it shouldn't exist." Izuku wasn't sure how to respond to that. He watched as Dabi finally lifted the mug, the steam kissing his stitched jaw. They didn't speak for a minute. Then Dabi glanced up, pale blue eyes unreadable. You ever get the feeling you're being watched, midoriya? Izuku's heart jolted. He gripped the counter slightly tighter. Yes, he said slowly. Dabi smirked, just a flicker. Maybe it's nothing. Or maybe it wasn't. Izuku didn't reply. He just watched as Dabi took a long sip of tea, sighing like he hadn't tasted warmth in years. For the first time that day, Izuku felt colder than the air around him. Outside, a feather fluttered down from the rooftop and landed silently in the alley. Rainfall and routine. The soft hum of the espresso machine filled the morning air of the Greenlit Café. Light filtered through the front windows in golden S, casting a warm glow over the polished counters and neatly arranged tables. The smell of coffee beans, fresh pastries, and subtle hints of vanilla wafted through the space, weaving a comforting, familiar atmosphere. Izuku Midoriya stood behind the counter, dressed in his usual forest green apron over a black t-shirt, hair slightly tousled from the early rise. His eyes were clear, calm, content. He wiped down a few mugs with a cloth, humming a little under his breath to the quiet tune playing from the small speaker near the register. It had been a steady morning. A couple of regulars had come, and an older woman who always ordered chamomile tea and sat by the window with her book, and a construction worker who liked his coffee black and his bagels plain. There were no big hero cameos, no villains lurking in shadows. Just the gentle rhythm of daily life. Katsuki had dropped by. An hour ago, grumbling about the new group project Aizawa-sensei had assigned. They're all extras, I swear, he snapped, sliding into the stool at the bar. One of them said we should do a musical presentation. A musical, Deku. Izuku laughed behind his hand. Well, Kaken, I'd pay to see that. Katsuki made a noise like he was about to combust, but it was followed by the tiniest twitch of a smirk. He didn't stay long. Just grabbed a spicy miso bun, a drink, and muttered something about needing to survive this hell before heading back out. Izuku watched him go with a fond smile. Moments like that felt normal. And normal was precious. Midday brought in a handful of new faces, a couple of office workers, and even a pair of high school girls who squealed when they realized the cafe had been trending online. Oh my god, this is it. The one with the peaceful vibe rule list, one of them whispered loudly. Izuku chuckled politely and took their orders. 2 iced matcha lattes and a chocolate croissant to share, right? They giggled. You're like, the sweetest barista ever. Thank you. I try my best. He didn't mind the compliments, but he never let them sink too deep. They were for the cafe, not him. Not really. As the afternoon waned and the soft blue tones of early evening began creeping in, the customers dwindled. A few lingered with laptops, typing away quietly, while others trickled out with murmured thanks and full stomachs. Izuku busied himself cleaning up behind the counter, refilling napkin holders, wiping down the display case, and noting what needed restocking. The cafe closed at 7 today. Sundays were always quieter. At 6:50 p.m., the bell above the door jingled one last time. Izuku glanced up, half expecting someone running late. It was no one familiar, just a man in a trench coat who glanced around briefly, realized the cafe was about to close, and gave a polite nod before leaving again. Once the door clicked shut behind him, Izuku locked it, flipped the sign to closed, and let out a soft sigh. He stood in the middle of the shop for a moment, letting the silence settle in. The stillness of the empty cafe was something he'd grown to love. It was like the walls themselves breathed in sync with him. All right, he muttered to himself, stretching his arms over his head. Time to do a little shopping. He headed upstairs to his small apartment above the cafe, simple, clean, and just cozy enough. He changed into a dark green hoodie, pulled up the hood, and slid his wallet into his pocket. The nearest late-night convenience store was about a 15-minute walk. Not too bad. He needed milk, eggs, and some extra matcha powder. Maybe some fresh fruit if they had any. The moment he stepped outside, a heavy wind tugged at his hood. He looked up. The clouds had rolled in without him noticing, and the sky was a shade darker than it should have been. "Please don't rain yet," he whispered. It rained. 5 minutes into his walk, a sudden downpour drenched the street like the sky had opened a floodgate. Izuku yelped and ducked under a tree, already soaked. Of course. Still, he pressed on. He wasn't going to let a little rain stop him. He'd weathered worse. By the time he reached the store, he was dripping. The cashier gave him a pitiful smile, but didn't say anything. Izuku grabbed what he needed quickly and made his way back with his paper bag tucked inside his hoodie. 15 minutes. It felt like an hour. His shoes squelched with each step as he finally unlocked the door to the cafe and stepped inside. Water pooled on the welcome mat behind him as he shut the door, locking it again. "Great," he muttered, shivering slightly. He kicked off his soaked shoes and padded into the kitchen. The bag was damp but not ruined. He began to unpack quietly, stocking the fridge and the pantry. Eggs on the second shelf. Milk in the door. Matcha powder into the tin. Each motion was rhythmic, grounding. Familiar. Once everything was put away, he grabbed a towel from the back room, dried off his hair as best he could, and trudged up the stairs. His socks left wet footprints on the wooden floor. A hot shower was the reward. The steam filled the bathroom quickly, and the heat chased away the chill in his bones. He stood under the water for a while, letting it wash away the ache in his shoulders, the cold in his fingers, the weight of the quiet night. When he finally stepped out, changed into dry clothes, and crawled into bed, the clock read 9:27 p.m. Just as he was drifting off, a feather barely visible in the corner of the room shifted in the faint breeze from the window. Unseen. Silent. Watching. Outside, on a rooftop across the street, a pair of golden eyes watched the darkened cafe windows. A small smile tugged at the corner of the pro-hero's lips. "So, that's how you spend your night off," Hawks murmured to himself. "Interesting." One feather fluttered softly back toward his coat. He didn't move. Didn't need to. Just observed. And waited. Because something about that cafe, about the quiet, kind-eyed boy running it, kept pulling his attention back. Even if he didn't understand why. Not yet. But he would. Soon. A little help. The morning light streamed through the cafe windows, warm and welcoming. The usual sounds of the city filtered in from outside, but within the Greenlit cafe, all was still and calm. Izuku's alarm clock went off, its usual beep echoing in the quiet space. His hand reached out automatically, silencing it with practiced ease. However, this morning felt different. His body didn't want to get up, and his eyes were heavy. There was a dull ache in his head and a tightness in his chest as if the cold from the night before had taken hold of him, but he pushed those thoughts aside. It wasn't the first time he'd woken up feeling a little off. With a groan, Izuku dragged himself out of bed, though his legs felt unsteady. He wasn't sure if it was the exhaustion from the previous day or something else, but he wasn't going to let it stop him. The Greenlit Cafe was his responsibility now, and he couldn't afford to slack off. He shuffled to the bathroom, splashing water on his face and brushing his teeth, trying to shake off the fogginess. Even as he looked at his reflection in the mirror, he could tell something wasn't quite right. His skin had a pallor to it, and his hair was messier than usual. His tired eyes stared back at him. He should have gotten more sleep. But there was no time to dwell on it. He was already running a bit late. The cafe needed to open by 7 a.m., and he was already 30 minutes behind. Izuku took a deep breath, pulling on his usual cafe attire, a green apron over his simple black t-shirt, and hurried downstairs. As he stepped into the cafe, the familiar scent of fresh coffee beans and pastries filled the air. It was a comforting smell, one that always made him feel grounded. But today, it didn't seem to help as much as it usually did. He started his morning routine, sweeping and mopping the floors, restocking the pastries, and making sure everything was ready for the opening. His movements were slower than normal, his body feeling heavy as he worked. Each task seemed to take twice as long as it should have, but he kept pushing through, refusing to let his exhaustion show. By the time the clock struck 7 o'clock, the cafe was spotless and ready for customers. Izuku, however, still felt off. He hadn't been able to shake the fogginess in his head, and his muscles were sore, as though he'd run a marathon. But the cafe was open now, and he needed to focus. He would deal with his fatigue later. The first few customers trickled in, and Izuku did his best to greet them warmly. "Good morning, welcome to the Greenlit Café," he said with a tired smile. His voice sounded hoarser than usual, but he hoped no one noticed. The first hour of business went by without incident. Izuku worked slowly but steadily, serving drinks and snacks, making small talk with regulars. But as the morning wore on, the sense of unease in his body didn't fade. It felt as though his head was floating just above his body, disconnected from his movements. Even the slightest tasks, like brewing coffee or preparing pastries, felt harder than usual. His hands were shaky, and his chest tightened whenever he tried to take a deep breath. He could tell he wasn't at his best, but he couldn't let himself collapse now. There were still customers to serve, still work to do. It wasn't until around noon, just as the lunch rush began to die down, that the sickness finally hit him hard. Izuku was walking toward the counter, carrying a tray of drinks, when a wave of dizziness struck. His vision blurred for a moment, and his legs wobbled beneath him. He gripped the counter to steady himself, but a deep, nauseating wave of fatigue swept over him. His head throbbed, and a cold sweat broke out across his forehead. He had to stop. His stomach turned violently, and he quickly set the tray down before stumbling into the back of the cafe. His breath was shallow as he leaned against the wall, his chest tight. This wasn't good. Izuku closed his eyes, trying to steady himself, but it felt like everything around him was spinning. He took a few deep breaths, but it didn't seem to help. His body was betraying him, and there was nothing he could do about it now. He leaned against the counter, clutching it for support, but he couldn't seem to gather the strength to continue. That's when the door to the cafe opened, and a familiar voice broke through his foggy haze. "Hey, Izuku," Hitoshi Shinsu's voice called from the entrance. Izuku blinked, trying to focus on the familiar face of his friend. Shinso had been coming into the cafe every now and then since he'd first visited, but today, something about him felt different. Maybe it was the way Shinsu's expression shifted as he took in the sight of Izuku struggling to stay on his feet. "Shinso," Izuku greeted weakly, forcing a smile as he straightened up. "Hey, what can I get you today?" Shinso didn't respond immediately. He stepped closer, his eyes scanning Izuku's flushed face with a scrutinizing gaze. "Are you okay?" he asked, voice tinged with concern. "I'm fine," Izuku lied, his voice a little too soft to convince anyone. He tried to steady his breathing, but his body refused to cooperate. Shinso raised an eyebrow. "You don't look fine, Izuku. You're pale." Izuku shrugged it off, though it took more effort than it should have. "Really, I'm okay," he repeated, forcing a smile. "Just tired, that's all." Shinso wasn't convinced. He didn't say anything, though. He just made his way to the counter and ordered his usual hot chocolate and a cinnamon roll. Izuku moved slowly to prepare it, his hands trembling slightly as he grabbed the mug and began to pour. But as he made his way to Shinsu's table with the order, it hit him again this time, much worse. The dizziness returned, stronger than before. His vision blurred once again, and this time, his legs didn't hold up. The tray slipped from his hands, and before he could catch himself, he collapsed to the floor. Everything went black. "Izuku." Shinsu's voice snapped him back to reality, though it sounded far away. He tried to open his eyes, but his body refused to cooperate. His head was spinning, and his stomach churned. Shinso knelt beside him, his face a mixture of confusion and concern. Izuku's body felt like dead weight in his arms as he gently helped him sit up. "Izuku, DMN it," Shinso muttered, rubbing a hand over his face. "What the hell's going on with you?" Izuku could barely hear him, his vision swimming. He tried to speak, but no words came out. His temperature was rising rapidly, and he could feel the heat radiating off him like an oven. The few customers in the cafe were staring at them, their concern palpable. Shinso glanced around and stood up abruptly, addressing them. "You all need to leave," he said firmly. "This place is closed for the day." There was no argument. One by one, the customers filed out, murmuring under their breath. They didn't need to be told twice. As the door shut behind the last customer, Shinso locked it and moved to Izuku's side again, his face tight with worry. He crouched down and checked Izuku's forehead. His temperature was burning hot now, feverish. Shinso couldn't stand seeing his friend like this. He was too stubborn to admit he needed help, and now it was clear just how bad he'd been feeling all morning. He quickly scooped Izuku into his arms, lifting him with surprising ease despite his lanky frame. "I'm taking you upstairs," he muttered. "You need to rest. Don't fight me on this." Izuku was too exhausted to protest, and he let Shinso carry him up the stairs to the apartment. The room was quiet and dimly lit, the faint smell of coffee lingering in the air. Shinso gently laid Izuku down on the bed, pulling the blankets over him. He then hurried downstairs to grab some water and a thermometer. He had to make sure Izuku was going to be okay. As Shinso checked his temperature again and wiped his forehead with a cool cloth, he couldn't help but think how reckless Izuku was. How he tried to keep the cafe running despite being sick. He was always so determined to keep things going, even when it wasn't good for him. Shinso sighed, his fingers brushing through Izuku's hair gently. "Rest, Izuku. I've got you now." The cafe would have to wait. For now, Izuku needed to focus on getting better. And Shinso wasn't going anywhere. The apartment above the Greenlit cafe was quiet, save for the occasional rustling of blankets and the soft hum of the refrigerator. The usual sounds of the city cars, people talking, the general bustle of life seemed a world away, muffled behind the thick walls of the cafe's upstairs quarters. Hitoshi Shinso had never been in the cafe apartment before. He hadn't even imagined he'd end up here, much less have to take care of Izuku while he was sick. But here he was, sitting at the edge of the bed, keeping an eye on the sick cafe owner who had practically collapsed in his arms just hours ago. Shinso wasn't sure what had happened. He'd been visiting the cafe like he usually did, chatting with Izuku, ordering his regular hot chocolate, when suddenly the cheerful young man had just fallen. One moment he was smiling, the next, he was unconscious on the floor. The sight had sent a cold shiver through Shinso. He'd never seen Izuku look so vulnerable before. The normally energetic, determined man who ran the cafe had been reduced to someone who needed help just to sit up, someone who couldn't even take care of himself anymore. And for some reason, it made something tighten in Shinsu's chest. He glanced at Izuku now, who lay in the bed, curled beneath the covers. The pale green color of his face had given way to a flushed red hue as his fever seemed to rise and fall with the passing hours. He was still unconscious, his breath shallow but steady. But even in sleep, Izuku's presence was overwhelming. His heart seemed to radiate warmth, as if the very air around him was infused with a quiet energy. Shinso hadn't expected to find himself in this situation. He had never imagined taking care of someone else, let alone someone as stubborn and independent as Izuku. He wasn't exactly the nurturing type he'd learned to keep to himself over the years, relying on his own skills and instincts. But seeing Izuku like this, it was different. He reached over and gently adjusted the blanket, making sure Izuku was comfortable. Izuku didn't stir, but the faint smile on his lips, even in sleep, made Shinsu's chest tighten a little. Izuku always smiled like that, genuine, soft, a little awkward, but always there. It was like he had an endless reservoir of warmth that he could pour into anyone around him. And yet, he never took time for himself. Never admitted when he was struggling. Shinso sighed, brushing a stray lock of hair off of Izuku's forehead. He had never really known Izuku outside of their cafe exchanges. He was a regular, someone Shinso saw every few days, someone who was always there with a friendly smile, ready to listen, ready to serve. He'd never imagined the kind of depth Izuku carried within him. Now that Izuku was in this state, Shinso felt a sense of protectiveness stir in him, one that he couldn't quite shake. It was strange. He didn't know why it affected him like this. But seeing Izuku, who was so selfless and kind, struggling sick, he couldn't just leave him to deal with it on his own. He knew he had to be there. The rest of the day passed in a blur of mundane tasks, bringing Izuku water, checking his temperature, making sure he had enough blankets, and occasionally wiping the sweat off his brow. It felt like a routine, though not one that Shinso had ever thought he'd be following. The idea of taking care of someone else had never really occurred to him. But now, as he sat by Izuku's bedside, listening to the soft sounds of his breathing, he couldn't imagine doing anything else. As the afternoon stretched on, the fever didn't seem to improve much, though it didn't get worse either. Izuku's condition remained stable, but his body was clearly exhausted. Shinso stayed close, watching over him as best as he could. It was just before sunset when Izuku finally stirred. His eyes fluttered open, his vision blurry for a moment as he tried to make sense of the room around him. The first thing he saw was Shinso's worried face, his brow furrowed in concern as he sat by the bedside. "Shinso." Izuku mumbled weakly, his voice hoarse. What happened?" "You passed out," Shinso replied quietly, his voice almost soft as he reached for a glass of water. "You've been running a fever all day." Izuku's tired green eyes met Shinso's, and for a moment, there was a lingering silence between them. Izuku looked like he was about to say something, but the words didn't come. He took the water Shinso offered him, slowly sipping it as he tried to gather his thoughts. "I didn't mean to worry you," Izuku finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. Shinso gave a small, lopsided smile. "You didn't worry me." His tone was light, but there was something deeper behind it. "It's just I'm not used to seeing you like this." Izuku swallowed the water, his hand trembling just slightly. "I didn't want to make you feel like you had to stay." He lowered his gaze, his cheeks flushed with a hint of embarrassment. "You didn't have to do all this for me." Shinso's eyes softened, and he leaned forward slightly. "Izuku, don't be ridiculous. You passed out in front of me. I wasn't just going to leave you alone." Izuku blinked at him, confusion written all over his face. "But you don't even know me that well. I mean, we've only talked a few times." Shinso chuckled softly, the sound low and warm. "Yeah, but that's the thing. I've been coming here for months now. We've talked. I've seen you at your best, and I've seen you push yourself beyond your limits. So yeah, I care." He paused for a moment, almost as if unsure whether to continue. "You may not realize it, but you've got this way of getting under people's skin, you know." Izuku's cheeks reddened even more, but he didn't pull away. He simply looked at Shinso, his eyes wide and a little uncertain. It was rare for him to let someone in like this, to open up to someone who wasn't already part of his inner circle. But for some reason, with Shinso, it felt easy. It felt natural. "I'm sorry for worrying you," Izuku mumbled again, but there was a warmth in his voice now, one that wasn't just from the fever. "I really don't know what I would have done without you here." Shinso smiled softly, his eyes locking with Izuku's. "No need to apologize. Just get better, okay?" Izuku nodded, a faint smile pulling at the corners of his lips. "Thanks, Shinso. I really appreciate it." The two of them sat in comfortable silence for a while, the only sounds in the room being the soft hum of the air conditioner and Izuku's occasional cough. Shinso stayed by his side, keeping an eye on him while occasionally asking if he needed anything. Izuku wasn't used to this kind of care, but it felt strangely comforting. As the night stretched on, the room grew darker, and the soft glow of the streetlights outside filtered in through the windows. Shinso stayed in the chair beside Izuku's bed, his head resting on his hand as he quietly watched Izuku doze. He'd never expected to feel this way about someone. Never expected to feel so protective, so invested. But here he was, watching over someone who had become more important to him than he'd ever thought possible. Maybe it was the way Izuku had taken care of him when he was struggling, small acts of kindness that hadn't gone unnoticed. Maybe it was the way he had always been there, steady and reliable, despite the weight he carried. But tonight, as Shinso stayed at Izuku's side, a small but undeniable feeling began to stir in his chest. He had a feeling that maybe, just maybe, there was more to their friendship than he had realized. And that, for the first time in a long while, made him feel something other than the usual detachment. Something more personal. Something more important.